That's
What's that?
On a pole.
On a pole, on a fishing pole. That's right, buddy. Bryce, you want to come up here? Hey, you want to come up here and get us started on the camera?
You want to be on TV?
Come here, Bryce. Come
Go
here.
up there with Billy.
Come here. Come sit right here on my leg real quick. Come here, bud. All right.
Hold that door.
Hold your bait. You got some fishing baits. Daddy's got to watch your fishing baits. Can you say hi to the people out there in YouTube?
Can you wave
right there in the camera? Say hi.
Hi.
What are we going to do tonight?
What y'all going to talk about?
What are we going to talk about tonight?
I got awesome tiger baits
Awesome tiger baits.
and catfish baits.
Catfish. Oh, you can go back to your mom.
We're going to have to show you on the video. When
Good job.
That's it.
Hey, great job to Bryce. Hey, this guy, now my kid wants to be on the camera. I got my two kids over here. It's family night tonight apparently, but that's all right.
Not here.
All right.
Hey, sit down. Silly goose. Hey, thank you guys for coming. Thank you guys for watching. We have a very special first-time guest. I'm very glad that he's here tonight. This is Mr. David Ozio to my left right here, and he has been kicking around this old pond for a long time. And it's kind of, you know, we've been talking about lately on the channel, the content we're creating. It's kind of tournament season. We got the biggest tournament of the year next weekend. We got another one of the biggest tournaments of the year a month after that?
Yeah, in October.
In
Third
October?
week of October.
And if you're a Lake Fork local, it's kind of always tournament season because there's always some kind of tournament going on out here. It seems like through most of the year. So David is absolutely one of the better tournament fishermen on this water out here. He has cashed a lot of checks out here. He's really good at dealing with this slot limit. He's got a lot of experience doing that. And he's just a great tournament fisherman in general. I know him for a long time. I've seen his results going to other lakes and cashing checks and doing his thing. So there's a lot of knowledge under that hat right there and a lot of experience, a lot of time on the water. So we're super happy to have David here tonight. And if you want to get prepped for a tournament, if you would like a trip, if you're going to fish a tournament, or if you just want to get on Lake Fork and enjoy some time and go out on a great guide trip, David does have some dates available. He's got a personality too, as you can see, but he does have some dates available. And like always, whether it's me or Ronnie Kelly or David or whoever it is, any of the guys that we work with, you can always book a trip through yourlakeforkguide.com. We'll be sure and take care of you there. So check us out there if you're looking for a trip with David or even with me. You ready?
This is a little bit strange for this man right here, okay? For when he asked me about this, I'm like, you know what I'm going to talk about, right? And he kind of cringes a little bit. Yeah,
because it's literally my least favorite thing.
He is a power fisherman,
yeah,
and we go the other direction a little bit because it's been, you know, I mean, you guys fish here a lot, and you know how this lake can be. 20 years ago, this lake was a lot easier than it is now. A lot of these lakes was a lot easier way back then. And I think that right now on this lake and a lot of these lakes around here, the skill set has to be a lot larger now than what it was way back then. And so, i.e., that's why y'all are sitting here, and it's people that'll go the extra mile to learn that extra little bit, you know, from guys like this, from Ronnie, from all these guys that can teach you to actually to try to be just a little bit better fisherman. And that's what it is. Tonight, I hope you take something away from this that's going to actually help you to put a few more fish in a boat. I major in drop shot. Long time, been doing that a long time, and there's a lot of reason behind it. Fish a lot of tournaments. Matter of fact, I'll be at Sam Rayburn at the end of this month and the first weekend of October. And don't know if I'll be doing that down there, but our goal is you know, we've got to get 20 to 25 pounds each day. And if it takes the drop shot to do it, so be it. But we'll be fishing some brush piles, deep brush piles there. And when the bite gets slower and you're not getting quite as many bites, it's the magic. It really is the magic bait. How many of you have ever used a drop shot? All right.
Let me interject one thing right here. You guys have watched my channel. Y'all know I don't like throwing the drop. It's probably my least favorite thing to do is drop shot. Well, guys, right now is the one time of year where it's ready to go on my boat. Like, this is the time of year to throw a drop shot over the next month, month and a half, 2 months, whatever.
Anytime that the bite is hard, anytime the bite is tough, it is the go-to bait in order to salvage a day. All right. And as soon as I pop through this, then I'll answer all the questions. And there's a lot of methodology behind doing it the correct way. All right. Now, mind you, this is the way that I do it, but I've had 25 years, 27 years of learning at this in order to get better and better and better at it. And the applications that we use, like on these rigs right here, are what you're going to see that will help us to try to teach you to match it up to what your goal is for the day. I use a lot of Baitcasters to fish drop shots with, and there's a reason why. All right, we do a lot of pitching. I mean, whether it's timber, docks, it doesn't matter. Anything that you can get a bait up underneath, then the Baitcaster is a lot more deadly as far as accuracy. Spinner rods are extremely hard to be accurate with. So the Baitcasters are really the number one thing in order to do it. Well, in order to do it, once you use a Baitcaster and have put it in your hand and started, let's say for example, pitch it at trees or stumps or whatever the case, what you're going to find is if you have it rigged just with the regular drop shot, the way that you would normally rig it like this, and you keep pitching it, most of the time, no matter what weight you use, it's going to helicopter going down. Okay? And when the helicopter's going down after about an hour, what ends up happening is the line starts wrapping around the tip of the rod. It will drive you absolutely insane. Now, it's with a Baitcaster, it's more prevalent, not as much with the spinning rod. Most of the time, people on spinning rods use braided line. And then they'll, which I'll show you here on this other rod I've got here. With a Baitcaster, I do something substantially different for a very good reason. You'll notice that there's a little bitty swivel right here. It's a 35-pound Spro swivel. Very, very, very small Spro swivel. And the reason why I use that swivel is it gets through the eyes. These are micro guides on the end of these rods right here, and so no matter what, it'll come through the guides. But it serves two purposes. Number one, it'll take all the twists out of the line. So you can just pitch your heart's content. When you're fishing deep, 25 foot of water, 30 foot of water, that thing will helicopter going down, and it'll just save that line from wrapping around that tip. All right, that's the number one thing right there to save your peace of mind. The number two part about that is that when you set the hook, this is what I wanted to do a while ago, and I failed to do it.
It's okay, we got a running clock right there too.
Oh, okay, I can't see it. Dude, I'd have to have the Hubble telescope to see that. And that's the number one thing is when it helicopters down, it's going to twist the line and wrap around the tip of the rod. So you can pick these rods up and look at them, but you'll see how small that swivel is on there. Now let's break down on how this thing's tied. I use mono on the main line. All right, everybody uses, a lot of people will use fluorocarbon, a lot of people will use braid, and I'm going to give you the pluses and minuses about that. I used to fish with a guy that used braid on his Baitcasters, all right, and on his spinning rod. He could get away with that, and the reason why he could was because he had a very slow hook set. All right, he didn't really snap on it. You know, I mean, like this guy probably, you can hear the rod whistle whenever you swing on it. All right. I had a client about 2 months ago that I've never had this happen before. He set the hook so hard on everything. The very first hook set that he made that day, on the very first day of the guide trip, he broke the rod in half. The very first hook set. Over a 2-day guide trip, he broke off on the hook set 14 times. With the drag set, with everything perfect on the rod and reel, he broke off 14 times. So if you use the wrong application...
Can you please text me his name so I know who to not make upset?
He's from Louisiana.
I don't want to mess with him.
Broke off 14 times. That was the damnedest thing I've ever seen, to be honest with you. But you could really have the right application, but have it set up all wrong. And the guy that I fish with, Sam Rayburn's the same exact thing. He swings on that thing so hard that you've got to have all your ducks in a row in order to keep from breaking off on the hook set. We'll go through each step and reason why. First, on the setup, I use mono. And the number one reason why I use mono is I want the stretch. All right. And when you're using a drop shot and you get a fish on and he's pulling the drag, if you've got the drag just a little bit too tight, all right, you need that extra stretch in the line to save the fish, number one. Drag is key. We'll get to that in a minute. But that is the one key factor. I've used fluorocarbon on it before, and I've found out that two things happen that are really not good with the fluorocarbon. Number one, the knots break real easy, so you have to tie a specific knot. A specific knot. We'll get to that in a minute. And the second thing is, if you don't have the drag backed off just right, what you'll do is you'll straighten the hook. Straighten so many and broke so many hooks, no matter what hook you use, just because of the fact that there's 30% less stretch in fluorocarbon, and there's 0 stretch in braid. So that's why we use that, all right? So now, we use a fluorocarbon leader though, going from the swivel down to the hook, down to the weight, we're using fluorocarbon, all right? And we tie a specific knot on here, and because of the fluorocarbon, it's called San Diego Jam. How many of y'all ever heard of it? San Diego Jam knot, all right? Get online, you can either look it up, that's a Shaw Grigsby knot, or
we also did a knot video earlier this year. Me and Ronnie did a knot video earlier this year, and that was one of the knots that we have.
Jam knot, and I've taken all these knots, I've tested them on a Berkeley line tester, right? And tested every single one of them, and the jam knot will not break in the knot at the fluorocarbon. It will break in the line at the fluorocarbon with the jam knot. If you tie a polymer knot on that right there, it'll break at the knot every time. Right? So there's 2 knots that have tested on the line tester, is the Aaron Martin's knot and the San Diego Jam knot. And those will be bulletproof in order to get you by. Now, I do this a lot different than a lot of people will do. Most of the time what you can do is go ahead and tie your leader line onto this and have, say, a 6-foot piece of leader, and then go ahead and tie your hook with an Aaron Martin's knot. I've gone one step beyond that, and when I tie this leader, what I'll do is I'll pull out about a 6-foot section of line, double it in half, and then go through the hook, right? Tie the San Diego Jam, and then cut the loop off. Take scissors, cut the loop off. Pull the 2 lines apart, and then you'll find out which way the hook's got to be. What you need is, with the drop shot, and I've seen a lot of people not do this and make this mistake, and it costs them. Whenever you're finished with the drop shot, see that hook's got to be facing upward. If it is not facing upward, you are going to miss the fish. All right? So whenever I have this line split like this, yep, the hook has got to be facing upward. So when I have the line doubled over like that, when I'm tying it, I've got a big long tag here. Once I get through, I turn it around this way to find out where the hook is. And so what I'll do is I'll end up deciding how much length I want for the leader, going down to the weight. I mean, it could be as much as this right here, and it has an application. It could be 8 inches. It could be 20 inches, based off whatever you're trying to do. So once I have that, I'll just cut off, say, 20 inches. I've got that up there. I'll put the knot on. I'll put the weight on first, and then I'll tie my last knot onto the swivel, which is a San Diego Jam. And then the whole thing's done. It's more time consuming, but after fishing as many tournaments as we fished over the years and having the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, I've been through all of it. And this was the way that we ended up getting around all the problems that we had with it in the past by tying this right here. Now, you can do it a little bit different when you get to a spinning rod, but let me get through this one other part of this first. So that's half the battle right here, is getting the thing rigged up. The other half the battle is the weapon you choose to use the drop shot with. I have seen some bodacious setups by people with the rods they'll come out with, and it just happened last weekend. I had some clients that I put on fish for the Mad Dog Moore tournament, and my one client he has become an expert at this. He brought somebody with him from Dallas, a friend of his, and he brought out these real heavy rods with these big Chronarch, or these old, I remember what the type of reel, it's of the big spool reel, and it's just too heavy of a rig for it. I think he had 17-pound line or 15-pound line on it, and it's just really not going to work that well. Like
my drop shot setup.
It's too heavy for the application. Yeah. For the thing to be done right with a drop shot, all right, the rod is the key. You have to have the rod, and every rod has right here, right there, on this rod right here, it has the stats on what the rod is, all right, the line rating on the rod. Very few people look at the line rating on the rod, all right. A good drop shot rod, the line rating on the rod is going to be a 6 to 12 pound, all right. This one is a little bit more. I want it a little bit heavier. I can use a little bit. This one's 8 to 14, but I'll never go heavier than that, right. So that is how much that the line, whenever you set the hook on it, number one, it keeps the line from breaking. Number one, keeps the hook from stretching. The hook from breaking, the line from stretching too much and breaking. So that's why that setup is critical, all right? The second part of this is setting up the drag on the reel. All right. Does anybody know out of this group right here the true way to set a drag up on a reel? Have you ever been taught? All right. The technical way to do it, the perfect way to do it, and it's a PIA to do, but you go get one of those sliding scales that have the the little measuring bar on the bottom. All right. You affix it to something, right, and secure it. Take the line, pull you out about 20-foot line, tie it onto that scale, back up about 25 feet, set the hook on it, all right? And you drag, have it set loose, it'll go, whoop, it'll slip like that, all right? Go down there and look at that bar on the scale and see how much it moved. So for 12-pound test line, what you need to have is 1/3 the tensile strength. So you need 4 pounds of drag for 12-pound line. Okay? If it's any more than that, you run 2 risks. One, if it's a big fish, any large run that he's going to make, he's going to put more than 12 pounds of pressure on it. If the drag is not set up to accommodate, right, even with the correct rod, the line, one of 2 things are going to happen. The line's going to break, or the hook's going to straighten out or break. Had them both happen. Okay? So you keep dialing that in. That's the perfect way to do it. The secondary way to do it is that you take and dial this drag back like this, and if you've done that once, you start pulling on this right here, and you'll get the feel of what too much is and what not enough is. All right? By tightening it up, you tighten it up a little bit, you can see, it's a lot tighter. All right? And when you have a 7, 8, or a 9-pound fish on there, if that drag is not spinning a little bit, you'll learn over time as you practice with it and play with it and have a big fish on that you're going to get the exact right feel of what that needs to be once you set this reel up. And that is the other critical part of the setup in order to land more fish. When you're in a tournament, that's the goal. You have to put more fish in the boat, right? And the more you miss or the more disasters you have, what's the long run on that? Cost you money. Okay? So our goal is, when we're out on the water in a tournament, fishing a tournament, is to reduce the amount of mistakes that we can possibly have, right? And so setting the equipment up perfectly alleviates a lot of those mistakes. Now, you'll say, well, that's all fine and dandy, good deal. So what you do? You get all rigged up, you learned a lot today about this, you're gonna go, you get it all set up, man, you even got the scale, you tested it, you got your drag set just right, you get out on the water and you're fishing, and all of a sudden, man, you're starting to catch them, all of a sudden you break off. What happened? What happened? You know, I'm fumbling around like this. It is a byproduct of fluorocarbon, all right? Fluorocarbon on knots cannot stand the strain of a bunch of fish. So what ends up happening is, with fluorocarbon, is the more fish you catch on it, no matter what knots you use on it, it tightens the knot up a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, till finally after 6, 7, 8 fish, 9 fish, add some 6, 7, 8 pounders in that mix right there, you're eventually gonna have it break at the knot. You will have it. When I'm fishing a tournament out here, especially any time that I'm just strictly using drop shots, the day before I make up 5 leaders, okay, with the weight, the desired distance from hook to weight, depending on what I'm fishing. If I'm fishing shallow, all right, you're going to see that we're going to use a drop shot leader that long right there. In some cases, I've won several tournaments here on this lake using a leader that long, 3 inches, right, with a 1/4 ounce weight. We've won tournaments here before with them 6 and 7 inches. I've won tournaments here with them 20 inches. It all depends. Usually, the shallower you fish, the shorter the leader. The deeper you fish, the longer the leader. Rule of thumb. All right? And then if you're fishing boat docks, all right, you don't want a long leader on that. 5, 6, 7 inches is really, I'd even go with 6 inches on that if you're fishing boat docks. All right? Anything you're flipping, whatever the case, stay shorter if you're flipping. Anytime you get away and you're going to cast a drop shot and work it down a ledge or whatever the case, then you can actually get an idea about, you know, you might lengthen your leader. Now, if you're graphing around that area in 12 to 15 foot and you see these fish and they're setting 3 foot off the bottom, go with a longer leader. Not rocket science, all right? And so that will get you to the next level right there. So just expect that if you're using a fluorocarbon leader, that you're gonna eventually break it off. Now, what we do is that we're fishing for these unders here in tournaments, and I'll put a lot of people in the next week and a half on unders for this event. You're not gonna break as many off on the unders as you would if you were catching 5, 6, 7 pound slot fish. The bigger the fish, the more the knot is gonna have a strain on the knot. Smaller the fish, not so much. So if I've caught 15 or so bass, and I'll just go ahead and sit down at the bottom of the boat and put a new leader on. Just to do it. And I teach every client that go ahead and do that just as a precaution, especially if you're fishing the big bass splash. All right? So that way it saves you a possible disaster, and actually will help, so because you never know. The next one that could have been a broke off fish might be a 268 under, which wins you a big prize as far as that goes. So spinning rods.
Can I ask a question before you get?
Go ahead.
When you're fishing a drop shot, do you keep the line tight?
I'm going to get to that here in a minute. I'm going to give you the setups, and I'm going to teach you how to use it.
All right.
All right. Good question, though. All right, so on a spinner rod, most people would rather use a spinner rod to drop shot with, and it's the more accepted, the more known. I mean, I can't get by the fairy wand application. But
I don't know who
I know
these
you were
people
going
are.
to say it.
I don't know who these people are you're talking about. I don't know none of them.
But I just, especially as much, if I'm in deep water, and you can see that I've got a longer leader set up on this one right here, you know, some 14, 15 inches from hook to weight. Fishing a deep water application, fishing deep brush piles or something like that, yeah, you might want a setup like this. Even if I'm fishing a deep brush pile, I'm still probably going to use a baitcaster, but there is times when I will use a spinning rod. And that is going to be when I'm using leaders that are under 8 pounds. If I'm down using a 6 pound leader, I'm almost always going to use a spinning rod, okay? And because of just the nature of the beast with the spinning rod.
Do you find that you actually do have times where you go to line that light out here with the, you know, dirtier water and stuff and all that? I mean, is that something you really put into practical application around here?
All right, give you a couple stories before I finish this right here. To answer that question with lines. Fishing a tournament at Sam Rayburn a few years ago, and it was an Everstart tournament, and whenever I go to an event and I start pre-fishing for a tournament, I'm going to start with, you know, whatever I think that the pattern might be, and if it's a Carolina rig pattern or crankbait pattern or whatever the case, I'm going to start off with that application right there, and it depends on the bite. If I'm having a tough time getting bit after the first 2 days of practice, what I'm going to always do is do 2 things. I'm going to start sizing down on my line, and I'm going to size down on my baits, right? I want to get a bite first, and then figure out if I'm a round fish, and then if I catch a 5 or a 6 pounder on a light rig, then I'll dig out either a big shaky head or something that is heavier line in order to accommodate, so I don't risk breaking off or something like that. So in that in particular tournament, I ended up at the end of practice figuring out that I had to use a spinning rod with 8 pound test line, okay, in order to get bit. And I was on enough fish that I thought that, well, you know what, I might not win the tournament, but I think I'll do all right. So I drew my partner. It's a draw tournament. I have a partner. We go to the spot the first day and get on it, and I pull out that spinner rod, and at 9 o'clock in the morning, the guy's begging me for one of those baits. I was using a weightless rattlesnake. It was a March tournament on an 8 pound test line and a spinning rod. After the first day, I gave him the bait. After the first day, I had 32 fish, right? After the first day that I had bites that I got in the boat, he had one. And I was not blocking him off, no way, shape, or form. We're fishing a grass line in a pocket, and we're just working the edges, and he can work all the edges I can, all right? So I weighed a 16 and a half pound bag. Didn't catch any giants, had a good bag. The next day I draw the guy, we go back to the same spot, identical, same story. 9:30, the guy's begging me for a bait. Gave him one. Fished all day. To this day, I had 34 bites, right? I had another 16, 17 pound bag, right? We get back to the weigh-in, did well in the tournament, didn't win, but did all right. I see those 2 guys, and I said, you know, out of curiosity, I said, what size line were you guys using? The guy the first day was using 17, the guy the second day was using 20. The guy that had 17 got 1 bite. The guy that was using 20 had 0 bites. I had 66 with 8-pound test line, fishing the identical same stuff he did. So if you get in a jam and you're fishing in a tournament, or even just fun fishing as far as that goes, and you're really on the struggle bus with getting bites, I always have a rod that's a 6 to 12 line rated rod, even with shaky head or a Texas rig or whatever, rigged with 12-pound test line, even for this lake right here. I just can't even tell you how many 10-pounders I've caught on this lake with 12-pound line. It's amazing. And especially on a drop shot. Caught a lot of them on a shaky head, a lot of them on a Texas rig, but the drop shot, and I'll give you an example of this too. Today, I was out looking for some others today for clients that I've got. I got in this area that I knew that should have fish, and I was throwing a Texas rig in there. I got not one bite on the Texas rig. All the bites that I had came on the drop shot with a leader about that long right there, a short worm like this, and a 1/4 ounce weight. They would not touch a Texas rig, but they would bite the drop shot. Now go figure that. I pulled out a fluke. I pulled out a underspin. I pulled out, what else out of that? A frog. And I worked. It was all shallow stuff. Did not get a bite on anything else but this rig right here. All right? So that goes to show you dialing in and getting ready to just do the job. Now, yesterday, I had a client yesterday that we were out and we were doing this exact thing in some shallow water. And I see him back there studying. He snaps on it, and if you saw the post last night, it was a 7-something, 7 whatever he caught, and dug it right out of the shallow water. There was vegetation. We were fishing, pulled it right out with 12-pound test line, no problem. Lipped it, didn't even net it.
Now, if you've never done that before, it takes some learning. Takes some learning and some doing to figure out how to handle a fish like that in shallow cover.
You cannot get in a hurry.
That's the deal.
When you're doing it, and take your time, and the fish will tire. And the one thing too, if you ever learn anything, you take anything away from this seminar today, is that whenever a fish bogs down in something like that, most people will just keep that rod just bent, they
try to pull them through.
And they're trying to pull it through. That's not what you want to do. Whenever they're hung up a little bit, what you want to do is just, you don't want to give them slack, but what you want to do is take the pressure off. Just put a little bit of pressure on him like that. Just a little bit of pressure. And a lot of times what he'll do is follow that line. He'll go right back to the pressure, the tip of the pressure where it's at, and he'll come right back out of the cover. When we're fishing deep brush or something like that, or we get hung up in a stump down on the bottom in 20 foot of water, 25 foot of water, 60% of the time I can get the fish out of there. If he's still pulling and you can feel it sawing on a branch or something down there, you use that strategy right there, just a little bit of pressure, and you can lead him right back out till you're free.
You got to keep the line tight. You don't want to slacken the line, but if you can kind of think, I always try to think, you should let them swim away.
Yeah.
They'll swim away from that. They don't want to be pinned up against that stump or whatever they're on either. So they will swim away from it, but you just can't. If you keep them pegged up against it, you'll lose them.
So on the spinning rod, I mean, I always have 3 or 4 of them tied up in the boat, no matter what. Clients love to use them a lot of times. But also too, what you want to do is that this is 20 pound, I use 20 pound braid on the spinning reel. 15 is actually good to use also. And then you can select the leader that you want to use, all right? Most of the time, I'm going to use 10 or 12 most of the time. But there's times when I'll use 6. And when we used to have tournaments here, I won back-to-back tournaments here in January one year using 4 and 6 pound test line, fishing 35 foot.
Sucker's braver than I am.
35 foot. Had the rod though that I was using was a 4 to 10 line rated rod, right? And in January, finding those little fish like that deep, you can do it. If you know how to do it, know where to look. And i.e. we won both tournaments back to back. Nobody ever come close. And we didn't really have but about 8 pounds in both events. But the key to it was the 4 pound test line and using a leader about this size right here and using a 4-inch worm. And that's January. Now, that setup, that deal right there, it won't necessarily work, but what will work is that you get up into the spring or whatever in some of these offshore structures that are staging structures, all right, where fish will set up, you could use 8 pound on that. If you're in a bottom contour area where there's no mess to hang up in at all, at least you don't think there is, a graph shows there's nothing really that's going to cause you any problems, all right, I would use the lighter the line that you can handle, you're going to get more bites. You will get more bites. guaranteed, right? And it goes even one step further than that. The guy that I'm fishing tournaments with right now, he's lost a lot of fish using this hook right here. Is a number 4, okay? It's a number 4, not a 4/0. It goes 5/0, 4/0, 3/0, 2/0, 1/0, and then it goes to a 1, then a 2, then a 4. So as you go that direction, the smaller the hook is. This is the hook I'll use on the 4-pound and 6-pound test line. And most of the time, it's on a spinning rod setup like this. So 3/8 ounce weight. Now, if it's windy, I'll use a 1/2 ounce weight, right? But that's all for deep application. Most of the time, I'm only going to use this setup for a deep application anyway. I'd rather use a Baitcaster the other way. The other side to this right here is what I wanted to tell you, and is that this knot that's required to tie, to connect fluorocarbon to braid is critical. This is called an FG knot, the most difficult knot on the board to tie.
That's on our knot video as well.
The most difficult. That is a hard, and to tie it properly, I'm tying this knot right here, I had to do it twice. Because if this thing bundles up here, it's a Chinese handcuff knot, and if that thing gets just a little bit bunched right there, forget it. Cut it out, start over. It's got to lay perfect. And you'll get through practice when you watch the video on it and see how it goes and see how the knot's tied, and they'll tie it with yarn, so you'll get a good idea of how to stitch it as you're doing it. It's got 20 wraps on it in order to get to it, and then you'll have two half hitches.
Why is that not your choice over, say, a uni?
I've just put them on the tester, number 1,
Gotcha.
and they don't break here on the testers, is the reason why. I used to use the Alberto knot. Much easier to tie, but it does break at the knot. And I had that happen. Once I started using this knot right here, never broke it at the knot if it was tied perfectly. And so you'll have to look that up and study it, and even get to their video where they showed you how to tie it, and then you will...
Well, Ronnie showed you how to tie it. I didn't show you how to tie it because I don't ever use a spinning pole.
Yeah, he won't ever use a spinning rod anyway. But that is how that you end up, getting the setup to where you can use the application. Even on this right here, see, you got to have your drag set just right also, even on this. So, and a lot of times, if you don't go the route of using the slide scale like I was talking about, you can still trial and error, right? And if you've got too much drag, first of all, a given is that this rod right here is 6 to 12 line rated rod. The given is you got to have the rod right, all right? And then you can play with the drag after that. And a lot of times I've seen people, and I've had clients do this. They'll set the hook on a good fish, and that thing is singing on that drag. I'm watching, and I know that the area we're fishing in, whether it's going to be trouble or not, right? And I'll tell them what to do, because if we're in a wooded area where that fish can run and get tangled up in some trees or whatever the case, but I've seen them reach down and on a baitcaster and tighten up the drag. Invariably, 2 things happen. And I had this happen, one of my clients, he told me he broke it off, and I can't believe that. A month later, I said, "Did you tighten up that drag?" He said, "No." A month later, he confessed. He confessed. And I was like, well, got this stuff set up for a reason, and so he's learned, and he's become an insanely good drop shot fisherman to date, because he does fish a lot of these tournaments around here. Okay, question. I know y'all got to have some questions.
We would have a marlin on offshore, and you actually, when the marlin is running with the bait, you have to back the drag off, because as the spool gets smaller, the drag is doubling.
Right, exactly.
So it's actually the same thing.
Exactly.
Just in a
And I'll do that a lot of times in a tournament, and we're going to go to advanced bass fishing here. On the hook set, a lot of times, if I'm fishing a drop shot, I'm going to have it tightened up more than 4 pounds on 12-pound test line, just for the hook set. Now, I don't swing on it real hard like he might. I'll lean into it. As soon as I lean into it and I can tell how big a fish it is, I'll reach over and then I'll back the drag off while I'm fighting the fish. So I don't want the thing to really, if I've got it set up at 4 pounds, if I swing on it too hard and it goes woo, like that, a lot of times you can miss hook sets on it where it's not enough pressure to drive the hook in. Right? So,
and I'm going to tell you, listen, and when I say what I'm fixing to say, I'm not telling you that I'm right. I'm sitting here telling you that I'm wrong. Like, there's a reason that I don't fish some of this real finesse stuff a lot, because it's just not in me to do it correctly. So even when I do try to do it, I tend to use, I've never gone below a 10-pound line out here, but I have gone down to 10 for a drop shot, shaky head type setup. But I've always done it on a baitcaster with a lighter baitcaster like this, a medium action, lower rated baitcaster. And my deal, when I'm fishing for me, if I'm fishing tournaments and all that, my drag will be locked all the way down. And one of the reasons I never use a spinning rod is because I'll lock my drag all the way down so that I will tone down my hook set. I know, contrary to popular belief, there are moments when I'll ease up on a hook set. I'll try to anyway. But I want to be able to have that drag locked in for that first pull. Even if I'm just pulling into them instead of snapping, I want to be able to pull that hook into them good. But I like having that baitcaster because now I can just push my button and start throwing my spool a little bit and feeding line out. And I kind of use that as my drag. Now, I'm not telling you that's the right way to do it.
But that's the pro level, is what that is. Are we all capable of doing that?
No.
No, most people push. I told somebody one time, look, so I want a guy trip, but the guy's got one of my rods, and he sets a hook on this fish, and it's a humdinger, and it's just trying to pull drag, and it's not. I can tell this line's at the breaking point. I went, push the button, thumb the spool, and he went click, back to
And that's an automatic. And so, you know what? Advanced players that are fishing tournaments, like you see the tour guys out there, granted, they can get away with that. They're that good, you know. But for the average weekend angler, that's
you need to have a drag system.
either you need to work with the drag system and really be a marksman at it. Get really good at it. And then you'll learn in the long run that, wow, I'm actually boating more fish.
Yeah.
The thing
I was trying to make that point because there's something to having the drag set a little bit tighter to get your hook set and then backing it off. I don't do that because I thumb the spool, but making sure that you've got a good way to drive that hook in the beginning and then backing off your drag, whether it be here or here, I think that's an important thing.
Yeah. Well, too, I mean, like I said, I have it a little bit tighter on the hook set, and then I can tell how big the fish is.
Right.
And I've done it for so long, I know I got a good idea. And I mean, if it's, I don't want to break a line, but if I know that it's what we call trash fish here, the slot fish, because I got a friend of mine gets aggravated when I call him that.
So all I try to catch is slot fish.
Well, for guide trips, those are called guide fish.
Yeah.
For tournaments, those are trash fish.
Yeah, that's right.
We don't need them.
That's
And
right.
anytime I set the hook on one of those fish like that, and I mean, I can tell this is a 4, 5, or 6 pounder, then I'm going to end up backing it off, because you've got time to when he's on the initial pull down that you can back it up a little bit if you're just a little bit snug, and you don't have to back it up much.